Welcome to R&R Living Life. Our stay in Alice Springs was short as we had previously spent 4 days here in 2024, so caught up on a couple of places we had missed last visit. Alice Springs straddles the usually dry Todd River on the northern side of the McDonnell Ranges, and I was interested to see the planes in storage at the Alice Springs Airport, as it became the first large-scale aircraft boneyard outside of the United States in 2011, commencing operations in 2014. Because of its dry, arid climate, the airport is perfect for aircraft storage and preservation. The facility stores commercial aircraft not in use, as well as those planes that have been decommissioned from service and which will be stripped of parts and be recycled, such as engines, electronics and wiring. As a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, various overseas airlines are storing their aircraft in the facility, and in 2020 it was announced that the facility was close to its current capacity and would be extended from around 100 aircraft to up to 200 in the near future. I was also interested to see where the stratospheric research balloons were launched from, having been at Giles to see the balloon launched there. We also checked out the 7 Mile aerodrome that was originally built in 1940 by the Australian Defence Department and used primarily by the Royal Australian Air Force and the United States Air Force to bring troops and supplies into the area during World War II, becoming the main transit base. Several civilian aircraft were permitted at the airport, but during the war its primary purpose was military as a refuelling and staging facility, as the airport was strategically located near the Pacific Theatre of Operations of the US Forces. From Alice Springs we made our way further north along the Stuart Highway, crossing the Charles River, a tributary of the Todd River that is only 19 kilometres long and has a catchment area of 39 kilometres. Our next point of interest was the Tropic of Capricorn marker, built as a bicentennial project marker with a stylised globe on a slant pole 6.5 metres high, approximately 30 kilometres north of Alice Springs. The Central Desert region is a vast remote area covering over 282,000 square kilometres with a population of around 4,000 people, primarily Indigenous Australians. The region is geographically diverse, encompassing parts of the Tanami Desert and featuring significant cultural sites. The unique landscape and ancient heritage inspires awe and wonder and is a testament to the resilience and richness of Indigenous culture. For the ancestors of these people, adapting to the changing world around them, through the harsh climatic rains of glaciers and ice sheets between 30,000 to 18,000 years ago, and then the gradual rising of the sea levels around 13.5 to 8,000 years ago, to successfully adapt, occupy and utilise the entire continent, covering a large range of ecological and climatic conditions, not just the wet temperate and tropical rainforests and coastal lands, but also the extremely harsh arid regions here in Central Australia, is hard to imagine. European exploration of the Central Desert region began in the late 1800s, when drovers and pastoralists began moving through the area in search of grazing lands for their cattle, interrupting the indigenous way of life. The first European settlement in the region, established in 1926, was at Hermannsburg, as a Lutheran mission established by German missionaries to provide spiritual and social support to the local indigenous population, as well as introduce European agricultural practices and education to the community. We had planned to stop at Ryan Well Historical Reserve, but there was no space to park Gidget with the number of campers. The well was a hand-dug well in 1889 to supply water to travellers and stock along the Overland Telegraph line. Named after Ned Ryan, a stonemason who became an expert at sinking wells. Having seen my uncle digging wells when I was young, I can say sinking wells is no easy task. Just over 130 kilometres from Alice Springs was Aileron, home of the striking giant figure of the Yamatjiri man. that stands 17 metres high and said to weigh a massive 8 tonnes, overlooking the town and surrounding region. The statue is visible from the highway. A further 60 kilometres up the highway was Tea Tree, a hub for agriculture, producing significant amounts of table grapes and vegetables. I was surprised by the horticulture being produced in the area about 14 kilometres from Tea Tree. In 2016-17, the Department of Environment and Natural Resources undertook a soil and land suitability assessment for irrigated agriculture in the Tea Tree area. The project investigated just over 13,500 hectares of private and Aboriginal land and identified more than 10,000 hectares suitable for a range of irrigated agricultural crops using primarily groundwater, which is drawn from underground aquifers, but the growth of the industry in the area has had ongoing water allocation issues. Again, it begs the question of how much underground water can we keep extracting each year, since water is a finite resource, meaning that the total amount of water on Earth has been the same since Earth's creation and is in a constant cycle. The fresh water we use for life is found in lakes, rivers and other surface water and makes up a very small fraction, about 3% of the total water on Earth. After refuelling in Tea Tree, we continued north along the highway. South of Barrow Creek was a memorial to Charles Palmer, a teamster who had died during the construction of the overland telegraph line in 1871, while transporting goods used in the construction of the line. Beside the memorial was a telegraph pole, complete with insulators. To think early communication was to send messages via an electrical telegraph system, 3,200 kilometres between Adelaide and Darwin, and on to the rest of the world. The line featured 36,000 telegraph poles and 11 repeater stations, necessary to boost the strength of the electrical signal, each about 250 kilometres apart. When it was linked to the Java to Darwin underwater telegraph cable in 1872, the communication time with Europe dropped from months to hours. Australia was no longer so isolated from the rest of the world. The construction of the line was seen as one of Australia's great engineering feats of the 19th century, and probably the most significant milestone in the history of telegraph in Australia. One such telegraph Morse repeater station was at Barrow Creek, a very small town about 280 kilometres north of Alice Springs, about halfway to Tennant Creek. During World War II, the settlement was used by the Australian Army as a staging camp for convoys of troops and supplies, which was known as No. 5 Australian Personnel Staging Camp. Barrow Creek has always had a problem with both quality and quantity of groundwater supplies, with the only good water at Barrow Creek being from rainwater, with limited supply due to the arid climate. During the Second World War, the Central Desert region played an important role, as it was the site of several airfields which were used to train pilots for the Pacific Theatre. The region was also used as a storage and distribution centre for fuel and other supplies. Having seen just how close to Australia war came, I wonder what would have happened if the outcome was different. In today's very modern world, especially in rural Australia, trying to keep businesses managed, staffed and profitable is such an issue. We have seen so many abandoned businesses on our travels, and Wycliffe Wells is no different. Now resembling a ghost town, it was once known as Australia's UFO capital, having gained its UFO fame after the Roadhouse was bought in 1985, and the owners decorated it with alien and UFO themes. When United Fuels took over control of the business, the appeal of otherworldly beings wasn't their focus. Added to this, a major flood in 2022 forced its closure, and it is now abandoned. Seeing it completely neglected and deserted was eerie and very sad. Such a shame, another roadhouse in rural Australia ceasing to exist. Thankfully, the Devil's Marble Hotel, that dates back to the 1930s, is still in business. The hotel was constructed when nearby Hatches Creek Wolfram Field was an active wolfram, also known as tungsten, mining centre that first operated between 1915 and 1957 before being abandoned. The mining history of the area was quite an interesting read, but controversial, with Aboriginal children exploited as labour, and then during World War II, indentured Chinese labourers from Nauru were sent there to mine. Because of the war, miners on the fields were called up for military service, and most of those remaining were ineligible to be called for military service because of age or physical ailments. About 20 kilometres further up the highway and along a short access road led us directly into the boulder fields at the Devil's Marbles, a 1,802 hectare reserve where we camped for the night. What an amazing place! Geologically, the marbles were formed from an upsurge of molten rock that cooled and became solid beneath a layer of sandstone. The solidifying granite caused vertical and horizontal fractures, creating rectangular blocks to form. Over time, water and thermal stress infiltrated the cracks, breaking down the sandstone and then the granite. As a result, rounded granite boulders perched on top of each other have been revealed, with thousands of these rounded granite boulders of varying sizes scattered across the valley, with many appearing to balance on top of each other. We could only look on in wonder and marvel at their formation as we wandered the site along informal trails with information panels along the way. Between the heaps of granite boulders were a number of miniature refuges and sheltered environments where more sensitive plants like the native rock fig survived and lizards could shelter. The boulders are affected more deeply by the extreme temperature differences between day and night in the arid desert region where the reserve is located. During daylight hours, the rocks expand slightly, and after nightfall they contract slightly, repeating the process every 24 hours. These repeated cycles of expansion and contraction, called thermal stress weathering, create cracks which sometimes go so deep that the boulder is completely split in half. We saw the result of this repeated expansion and contraction with split boulders, clearly cut as if someone had taken a sharp knife to them. Each boulder is a different size or curved spherical shape, ranging from between 50 centimetres to 6 metres across, some even seemingly to defy gravity. On our travels we have seen some amazing natural landscapes, and here was no different. The European name, Devil's Marbles, came from John Ross, who led a team of men surveying for the Overland Telegraph Line in 1870, and the area has also been the site of a tungsten mine and several World War II depots. The remains of these structures still exist on the reserve today. As we wandered the site, we could only marvel at how the granite formations have withstood the eroding forces of wind and rain, unlike the surrounding sandstone. The Devil's Marbles are a sacred site known as Karlu Karlu, a local Aboriginal term for both the rock features and the surrounding area, and translates to rounded boulders, with many boulders found mainly on the western side of the reserve. Ownership of Karlu Karlu Devil's Marbles was officially passed from the Parks and Wildlife Service of the Northern Territory back to the traditional owners at a ceremony held on the reserve in October 2008. The reserve is now leased back to the Parks Service, with the site jointly managed by rangers and traditional owners. Controversy over one of the boulders unwittingly being removed from the reserve in 1952 to form a memorial to John Flynn was eventually returned to the sacred women's site after more than 45 years of negotiations. The boulder on John Flynn's memorial at Alice Springs was swapped with a non-sacred boulder. The original boulder had been chosen as a symbol of John Flynn's link to the outback. These remarkable geological formations, surrounded by the rugged vastness of the area, changed colour depending on the time of day, sometimes red and orange, while at other times sandy reddish to a dark brown, even black looking as night set in. These small rocky islands in the desert, surrounded by a lot of sandstone, were certainly visually fascinating. They clearly showed how Earth is constantly being reshaped and changed by physical and chemical weathering and wind and water erosion, with many of the rocks being worn down to form soil and sand. On our travels, we have seen some incredible instances of how the Earth has been reshaped and fashioned into some of the most amazing landscapes, and not just rock formations. The countryside, the environments we see, nature as a whole, it is truly breathtaking. There have been some extremely fragile environments that have a tenuous hold on the world as well. Australia certainly has a vast and remarkable landscape. Though our stay in the park was short, it will be one place that Rick and I were certainly glad we stopped to spend time exploring. Later that afternoon, we enjoyed the spectacular evening hues as the sun sank below the horizon. What a way to end the day! The camping area was full, but it was still so peaceful and quiet. We needed to book online before we arrived, and camping fees did apply. An added bonus was that there were no pets allowed. Not that I don't love pets, but camping with them, no thank you. Join us next time as we watch an amazing sunrise before continuing north through Tennant Creek, the Three Ways, stopping in Renner Springs for fuel, and making camp near Newcastle Waters. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. Give us a thumbs up if you have. See you next episode. Stay safe and enjoy life. Cheers for now. Rick and Rosemary. R&R Living Life.